Hello everyone, welcome to the webinar Foundations of the Scaled Agile Framework with Dean Leffingwell. Dean, let's get started and take a look.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, I'm Dean Leffingwell. I'm sure you've heard about the Scaled Agile Framework. That's why you're here. In the next 30 or so minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of the framework. I'm speaking from a PowerPoint that is available online, basically freely available for use. It's available at scaledagileFramework.com/foundations. So this webinar is entitled Foundations of the Scaled Agile Framework, and in the next 30 minutes or so, I'll be walking you through the values, principles, practices, and a brief look at implementation. This webinar is tied to SAFe 3.0. That's the current generally available release of SAFe, and that will continue to be the case for some time. As we'll see in the roadmap, SAFe 3.0 will be supported well into the future. As you can probably tell or could imagine, we've been at this for some time. This is over my fourth decade of software development. And I will tell you that back even 15 or 20 years ago, I didn't think we'd be developing the way we are. I thought we'd be programming more like this. I thought we'd be sitting down at amazingly powerful CAD stations, which we of course have, and working in high-level languages, which of course we have, and working with the open source and class libraries and wireframes and drag and drop environments, which somewhat we have. And I thought we'd be working at a much higher level of abstraction, but as you know, progress doesn't always feel that way, and sometimes it feels like this. Sometimes it feels like we're just banging away independently, writing millions of lines, individually handcrafted lines of code. I threw this slide up on deck in front of a customer one time, and as soon as I put it up and made my comments about this computing division, by the way, this is Department of Veterans Affairs back in about the 50s, I believe it was. Someone said, well, at least they're co-located. So that's kind of the joke associated with this particular picture, which is that our teams aren't even co-located. And our retrospectives still read like a bit of a, something from a software development horror movie. Not enough visibility, no way to improve systematically. We don't know how to make things better. Retro after a large stage-gated waterfall project discusses issues like late delivery. Problems are discovered too late. Our phase gate software development lifecycle isn't helping reduce risk. As a matter of fact, we're starting to suspect, and there's evidence to the fact that that meeting early phase gate deliverables is contraindicative of good project outcomes. Morale suffers, and as we all know, we're in a business now where we really employ a volunteer labor force. Our knowledge workers can work in a lot of different environments, and they want to work someplace where they can be productive, and when their labor is directly applicable to the problem they intend to solve, and whether software reaches the market and solves the needs of the users and the stakeholders that they're designed to address. So it's still a fairly painful process, and I teach leading SAFe and the SAFe SPC class on occasion. I typically ask people in the crowd, how many here are involved in really large software programs? And most everyone raises their hands. After all, that's why they're here. And then I ask a question, leave your hand up if it's going really well. And virtually all the hands go down. Last class, there was one hand that remained up, and I said, well, congratulations, what's your secret? And he said, well, we've just started. And the rest of the class got a chuckle out of that, because the reality is it's still quite a difficult thing with our multinational, multi-distributed teams running on 5 or 10 platforms, working across time zones, delivering systems that demand extremely high reliability, 3 and 4 nines reliability, levels of performance that we couldn't even anticipate, levels of complexity that we couldn't even imagine even a mere decade ago. So what is our challenge? And this is a talk to management and leadership, and that's something that's perhaps a little bit unique to SAFe. We understand the role of management and the key stakeholders that are responsible for the outcomes of the business. And in my research, going back about a year and a half ago now, I went back and reread some of Deming's original work, and I've always been kind of curious as to his fame and why he continues to be with us today. And that's because he was ahead of his time. And as you read Out of the Crisis or The New Economics, you'll come across quotes like this. Now, this is not a quote you can Google to find. This is something that just struck me right out of the crisis. It is not enough that management commit themselves to quality and productivity. They must know what it is they must do. And further on, the second page, maybe, I don't remember exactly, or a page or two after the original quote, I found another quote, or another statement that said very simply, such a responsibility cannot be delegated. And that struck me as really the summary of my experience with helping others, developers, development teams, testers, product owners, product managers, programs, executives, and managers develop better software and deliver more complex systems with a little bit of grace, is that it is management's responsibility to know the way, and we can't simply count on our teams to understand the way of working or to implement the way of working. We have a leadership responsibility, and that cannot be delegated. There's another little vignette in that same book that I found fascinating. Deming was talking about one factory VP talking to another VP and discussing the fact that one VP wanted to visit the second. He wanted to come see why this factory had such high quality. And the VP of quality in that factory, VP of manufacturing actually, not VP of quality, said to that VP, he said, great, come on down. I'll be happy to teach you everything we know. We're not in a competitive circumstance. And I love to share our stories of success and the principles and practices. But he also said, but if you can't come, send no one. With the message being very clear, this is not a responsibility or a set of understandings or knowledge that can be delegated. It has to be retained and be part and parcel of management's very persona. And leadership, therefore, is key. So what is it that these managers must do? Well, our view, of course, is safe-based, and we see 4 primary areas where our leaders come in and help us achieve success with these new and innovative models. The first is to embrace Lean-Agile values. What is the value system that we ascribe to? What do we communicate to our employees? What do we think? What does deliver value to us? What do we treasure? What do we give credit to? And what do we care about? And then apply Lean-Agile principles, because these are the immutable truths, the fundamental underlying economics. Thirdly, implement Lean-Agile practices, and that's really where SAFE comes in. The values and principles are recorded in SAFE as well, but SAFE is largely a practice-based framework. And lastly, what do we expect of our executives and our managers? Simply, we expect them to lead, not follow the implementation. And that leadership, there's no substitute for that level of leadership. So what are these Lean-Agile values? Well, we, like many, have adopted the House of Lean as a statement of our value system. And our House of Lean has a foundation. I'll go to that one right away. That's the foundation of leadership. And it has a roof. The roof is value. And holding that up, the foundation holds 4 pillars that help us deliver value. The first pillar on the left is respect for people and culture. And if you engage down this path, you'll probably have the opportunity to receive some additional training. And we'll talk a lot about culture, and we'll talk about one of Drucker's famous quotes, which is the fact that culture eats strategy for breakfast. So it doesn't really matter what you intend to do. What you're going to do is going to be driven by the culture, the existing habits of the organization. The second pillar there is flow, or product development flow. And this is the notion that this constant starting and stopping and starting and stopping and delaying the delivery of value is simply ineffective in helping us achieve what we want. And what we'd rather see is a process that really flows continuously. Always new requirements, always new development, always new delivery, always new value. And that just is an incessant part of the process, and it's ingrained in the company. So we don't really need the large kind of project or initiative, project funding and assigning people to the work. We're going to try to do things differently. We're going to get the people assigned to value and value streams, and then we'll bring the work to them and help keep the thing in continuous flow. Innovation is the latest pillar in the House of Lean, and we have a whole body of work. Risa's work and others in the Lean Startup and Running Lean talks about the value of innovating. And certainly, if we can't use our Lean and Agile systems to innovate, they're not going to do us much good in the long haul. Pillar on the right is always part of Lean, and that can be anything from stated as Kaizen, which means good change, to continuous improvement, or our view of that, a little pithier, is relentless improvement. I know we all think we're improving all the time, and we certainly are, but the question we ask ourselves is, are we relentlessly improving? Do we have a few things we're working on right now that we know we can make better over time? I'm only going to talk about one of these. As I mentioned, if you kind of enter the SAFE framework or the SAFE community, you'll see more and you'll have the opportunity to learn more. But the goal here is really simple. value, and the shortest sustainable lead time. So what is our objective? Why are we even having this discussion? Why might you have this discussion with your PMO or your stakeholders or with your teams or with the folks in DevOps or even your end users? And the reason is very simple. We want to provide to our customers the sustainably shortest lead time, but not over the dead bodies of our folks, right? That's not sustainable, it doesn't last, and frankly, it's not humane. We want to deliver the best quality and value to people and society, and we want to make sure that we strive for and achieve high morale. It should be fun to do this. It shouldn't be a nightmare after every release. And safety for our customers, safety for employees, safety for their health and welfare. And in the traditional view of Lean, that safety was personal safety. That was things like avoiding, repetitive motion syndrome and not setting up manufacturing plants that put people at risk. But we have the same thing, only the safety for our knowledge workers, the security of a good job, a continuous job, a job that has a lot of flow, and customer delight. Let's not just meet their expectations, let's exceed them. And Sam Walton's quote over here is a constant reminder to us as well. There's only one boss, the customer, and he can fire everybody in the company simply by no longer walking through the door. So that's value. And you see the other principles. We'll talk about leadership here towards the end, but respect for people and culture, flow, innovation, and relentless improvement. That's the value system that we use to constantly reinforce what we care about here, and we think about those things. For example, there's discussions in innovation about how it is that you pivot when necessary, and discussions in the economic value about ignoring sunk costs. And these are just the reminders that we use to keep us innovating and moving forward and not worry about sunk cost or maybe an iteration that didn't have the outcome that we thought it might have, but to take the lessons learned from that and move forward. Underlying SAFE is a fairly newly stated set of principles, kind of the immutable laws, the economic fundamentals, the fundamental truths, and those include take an economic view. There's no reason not to, and there's every reason to think about the economics. People on our teams and programs make decisions every day. Are they making the right decisions from the economic standpoint? Are they doing things that provide the right benefit to our company and to our customers? Apply systems thinking. This is kind of a parallel or simply a part of Lean, which is that when you think about the full system, you realize a few truths, including the fact that optimizing a component of a system does not optimize the system. And indeed, you have to look at the overall balance, and there may be some component or some effort that needs to be sub-optimized in order to optimize for the long view. And you have to think about everything from the very beginning to the very end. Assume variability and preserve options. Let's wait till the last responsible moment to make those key design decisions. And that's one of the things that our stage-gated models haven't really helped us do. They tend to drive us to try to eliminate variability before we have really the knowledge to do that. Build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. This is the PDCA, the plan, do, check, adjust cycle, all the way back for 30 or 40 or maybe even 50 years of thinking about how to learn. How do we learn? We learn in small batches. And we want to build our systems and our solutions in small batches. We want to deliver those and provide that incremental value. As I mentioned, we'll build incrementally with fast integrated learning cycles. Number 5 is base milestones on objective evaluation of working systems. We're not opposed to milestones in our Lean-Agile world. We're fine with them. We just want to make sure that they reflect what's meaningful to us and what's really meaningful to the customer, which is how's our system working? How's that application working? Is it deployed? Has it made it through DevOps? Are customers actually using it? Number 6, there's quite a lesson into itself under bullet number 6 here. Visualize and limit work in process. Reduce batch sizes and manage queue lengths. These are derived in part from Reinertson's principles of product development flow and other works who have taught us the same thing. Apply cadence and synchronize with cross-domain planning. We're going to see cadence in cross-domain planning coming up very, very soon. Number 8 and number 9 really kind of speak to the people side. If you look at the first one above, that's really a business principle. The ones in the middle are really operating principles, ways to think about product development. But the last two, that's about our people and our culture. Number 8 is to unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers and to provide a working environment where they bring where they can use their intrinsic motivation to do their best work ever. And if you're creating an environment where your knowledge workers and all your workers are doing their best work ever, you create an environment that's going to last, an environment that's going to innovate. And lastly, in order to go fast, we need to decentralize decision-making. And as we decentralize decision-making, things go more quickly, and people are more empowered. If you think about empowerment, what is empowerment? If you ask somebody in class that question, they'll say, I can make a decision. That's great. And I'm accountable for that decision. So empowerment is not simply power. It's not the arbitrary ability to make decisions that affect others. It's the ability to make decisions and the responsibility for the results of those decisions that really create the fundamental notion of empowerment. So those are 9 immutable principles. And I think Deming said that one of the diseases of Western management is that everybody thinks their problems are unique. And, you know, they are unique, but the solutions that bring enhanced productivity and quality, the solutions can indeed be universal. So this is our view of a universal set of principles, and we think about these every day, and we think about them every time we evolve safe, or we teach a class, or we're in front of a customer. These are the things that drive our behavior. We can't explore them all, of course, in this short webinar. We can only explore a few. The one that I'm going to explore here is very simple. Build incrementally, because it accelerates value delivery. And if you use this slide and you talk about a stage-gated process on the top, and you talk to a customer about options, ways to approach development, the above option is we're going to work very hard to get your requirements right. We're going to design a system that we think is comprehensive and will meet all those requirements. And during this process for the next 3, 6, or 9 months, maybe even longer in a really big system, we're going to deliver documents that show you that we understand these requirements. I'll compare that to incremental delivery down below, which is that within a few weeks, maybe an iteration or 2, or maybe a PI of 6, 8, or 10 weeks, we're going to deliver a box of something that works. We'll install that box and let you evaluate it. And if it's not quite enough for you to deploy yet, we'll create an environment where you can evaluate it. We'll get that feedback, and those learning cycles will continue throughout the process. And that's fundamentally different, right? Different than our stage-gated process. It really brings agile and incremental delivery to provide that value. And as we provide that value, each of those small boxes delivers a little gray chunk of value here on the y-axis. But that box doesn't leave when you go to the next iteration or program increment. That box stays. That little piece of value is still working. It's deployed, or it's being built upon by other boxes. And we get feedback during that cycle. We see fast feedback as a key part of essentially every one of these boundaries, be they a sprint, an iteration, a program increment, or even a longer time frame. We want that feedback. And that provides incremental value. And what we deliver from an economic standpoint is the summation of all that over the time of development. Contrast that to the waterfall program, which even if executed well, can't possibly deliver any value until it gets to the very end. So a pretty simple metaphor to think about. Documents are code. I think almost all of our customers will take the code. And if we have some discoveries along the way, well, we were going to have them anyway. Let's just get them out of the way earlier and proceed down that path. So those are our values and principles. Now let's take a look briefly at some of the safe Lean Agile practices. First of all, what is SAFE? Well, SAFE is an online, freely revealed knowledge base of proven success patterns for implementing Lean Agile development at enterprise scale. I think it was one of the godfathers of Lean, Taiichi Ohno, who once said, no useful improvement was ever invented at a desk. SAFE wasn't invented at a desk. It wasn't invented inside the hallowed halls of the academic institutions. It was invented in the field. It was invented by drafting on really smart people doing really good work with Lean and Agile development and achieving good things. And if you think about your enterprise right now, you're somewhere on this path. That's why you're listening to this webinar, and you already have some things that are working well. So imagine a consultant comes in and says, what is working great? And you find these positives. And then you say, well, what challenges do we have? And the consultant says, I've seen that before. I was just at this other company, and they had an interesting solution for that. And out of that, you can grow a pretty extensive framework. And that's what we've been doing now for the last 8 or 9 years. And you can see that here. The first release of the framework is actually, I think, towards the end of 2011. And what our influences? Our influences are lean thinking. We're big fans of lean. I was fortunate to kind of grow up in the lean world. I actually went to Goldratt's school once upon a time on theory of constraints back in the 80s. Lean product development, we have the works of Kennedy and Leiker and Sutton and Reinertsen and more, and Ward and others that have taught us how to think lean when it comes to developing products. Systems engineering, we have to take a systems view. We're building big systems here. We have to understand the system, its environment, its impact on the environment, it's the way the environment imposes constraints on it, and all the components of the system, and how those components interoperate to create that. And we have our newfound, our only decade-old Agile development that we can use now. Agile Manifesto, dated about 2001, really unlocked the expressive power of the Agile team. But you're on a journey with us. We learn new things every day. You can see here that version 4 is on the way. And then maybe towards the end of the year, early the year after, there'll be a new version at work. We'll continue to support version 3 on through 2016. So version 3 is where you started your rollout, and it's actively solving your problems, and we have a lot of great feedback that that's the case. You can continue to operate on version 3. We'll support that with courseware and a copy of the framework as well. And then as your needs scale, your enterprise gets a little more mature, or maybe you hit that next generation, that giant new banking platform or whatever, then you might want to move to 4.0, and we'll talk more about that a little later in the summer. So here's the Scaled Agile Framework 3.0, and I think it's important to note that all these items are clickable. That's really the paradigm. This is the domain model, if you will. It's the domain model and the UI for a framework. The framework consists of a few hundred pages of content oriented around these various things. And you can see here 3 primary levels. You can see the portfolio level, where your initiatives really get funded, and where the value streams, that's construct we'll talk a little bit more, are contained and budgeted for. You can see things, the larger initiatives, business and architectural epics that are going to affect the value streams over time. The centerpiece is the Agile release train. This is the program level. I would say that right now that's kind of the sweet spot. That's really where we started. We didn't have to start here, and I'll describe why we didn't have to in a minute. But we did start building, using Agile teams to build really, really large programs. You can see a couple of important paradigms. You can see develop on cadence. What's that mean? It means that we use cadence and synchronization. There's an iteration cadence. Here's a synchronization point called the system demo. We use cadence and synchronization to make routine that which can be routine. And our planning and our demonstration and our feedback points, that can absolutely be routine. You see right here an iteration of planning sprint. You see a little bit of thinking time, maybe some downtime, maybe some refactoring time, maybe some time to incorporate the next planning cycle while keeping your cadence alive. But of course, you can release whenever you need to release. Some people release every day. But the reality is, it's not a monolithic system. There's lots of different ways to think about releasing, and even there's a securities trading system that I'm pretty familiar with, and we have releases of some back office software every day. But we also have a pretty fat desktop, and that one only wants to go out once and maybe twice a year at maximum. Continuous delivery is a pretty cool thing for some, but I think if I did continuous delivery of the framework, and every day we came in and you found a new framework, you'd find that disconcerting, and you couldn't adopt change at that level. So we call that develop on cadence and release on demand, and that's a key aspect of the framework. The train is always running, right? And we can drop cargo whenever we need it. We can drop a release out at any point. You also see additional roles and responsibilities, but I'm getting a little bit too deep here, so let me move on. Let me move on to the beginning. Nothing beats an Agile team. In the late 90s, there were a variety of experiments with folks just basically trying to get back to the basics. People like Kent Beck on XP, getting back to saying, hey, these process models aren't really working. Can we just write some code that works? Can we get the customer on site, or maybe through Scrum get a product owner proxy for the customer? And in 2001, then the Agile Manifesto was written by folks that were the thought leaders at the time, and they really unlocked, really unleashed what I like to think of the expressive power of Agile teams. And you see those teams here. You see a fairly common structure, the Scrum team with the product owner and the Scrum master and the devs and testers. You also see some other things, right? You see the fact that they deliver working software every 2 weeks. It doesn't have to be every 2. I mean, more frequent is better. Sometimes it's every 3, but the standard pattern in SAFe is for 2 weeks. Scrum is a fantastic and lightweight project management framework. Works incredibly well for software. It was invented for software. It's being used for software. It's being used for other things too. But Scrum isn't about the code. Scrum is about the people and their roles. Scrum is about the empowerment of the people and the ability to make local decisions at the product owner level. We've also been inspired by XP. And maybe we don't see quite as much, writing about extreme programming as we used to, and maybe the idea of pair programming aside XP was a bridge too far. But what about the idea of pair work? How about just making sure that every piece of code is seen by not 1, but at least 2 people before we stick that on our baseline? And what else do we know? We know that continuous integration is not optional. Collective ownership, peer review, coding standards, many, many great practices. Test first or test-driven development come from XP. Well, we don't want to leave those behind. And you can see we capture a lot of those here inside our code quality icon. And then more and more flow-based systems depend on Kanban. And Kanban can be a standalone method, or it can be synced with these other methods. So a combination of teams that are basically running Scrum. They use good XP-inspired technical practices for the definition of done, but they manage and visualize the flow of work. It's all good. So we don't believe that these methods are a zero-sum game. We don't think it's a discussion that, oh, we use Scrum, we use XP. Oh, you're bad, we're good. Or gosh, we use Kanban's pure flow-based system. We don't have all that planning overhead. Well, yes, you don't have the planning overhead, but you also, it's a little bit tougher to figure out when that particular item has to be coordinated with a bunch of other teams. So they're all good. These things all provide value, and we integrate them and provide practices around them all, and you can read about them all by clicking on SAFe. Right now, Kanban is actually in a guidance article. We did not change the big picture when we introduced Kanban to SAFe, but in the next version of SAFe, you'll see that that's absolutely the case. And you can, if you want to follow kind of the trends in SAFe, you can subscribe to the blog at the ScaledAgileFramework.com. Stick your reader there, and if we make a change, you'll know it. And you'll also see some upcoming indications of version 4. And one of the things you'll see there in version 4 is that Kanban teams is a great choice for a lot of people. You might be just a group of optics engineers with, one electronic circuit designer. Well, do I need these roles of Scrum? Not clear. Do I need to understand flow? Absolutely. But teams should have a choice. We shouldn't close our eyes to these great inventions. They're all here for us. They're all freely available. Let's apply what makes sense in the context that makes the most sense. Okay, I guess I was wrong about one thing. I guess there is something that beats an Agile team, and that's a team of Agile teams working together. And when they work together and they integrate their work, and we'll look at this system demo here as kind of a really quintessential test point. Every 2 weeks, a full system comes together. We call that a working system increment, and that can be tested and evaluated and demonstrated to our key stakeholders. You see product management here. We think that in general, product managers, great professionals in that business, and they're largely outbound. Pretty tough for them to flex down to be the product owner role at the same time. So our paradigm generally supports product management doing what product managers do, defining the features and frankly value proposition, pricing and licensing, and worrying about deployment and distribution aspects and packaging and documentation, all the things that are associated with a great whole product. Again, we take a systems view. We need product management to support us in doing that. And our teams are working together, and one of the things they're working together, I'll just use a simple example. Wouldn't it be convenient if our a dozen or so teams built a system that worked a lot alike, whether it was this screen or the next screen? Wouldn't it be nice if the team that built that screen used the same style guide? And maybe just a UX person or two, maybe working with a team or maybe working independently, said, here's the way the wireframes want to lay out for the next few iterations. Wouldn't it be convenient for our users if across the system everything worked a lot the same? Wouldn't it be powerful for us if we had some architectural runway. We knew how the system worked, which platforms it was going to be deployed on, and we planned for the things that we could plan for. We don't have too much runway because then we've kind of future-proofed the system, but we also don't want too little. If this is flat line, then it's going to be very difficult to deliver that program increment only 10 weeks away if I actually don't have the infrastructure, the table space, or the memory, or the algorithms that I need to be able to do that. So these teams operating with a common vision, a single program backlog, some notion of intentionality of architecture, just enough and not too much, and whatever UX guidance they need to stitch together a solution makes sense. And these teams work together and they're collaborative, and one of the ways they do that is with face-to-face planning and retrospectives, and they do that in these kind of larger sessions, these release or program increment planning sessions, and those are periodic too. And when you make them periodic, you can lower the transaction cost of that meeting because everybody knows there's another one right here. I need to get ready. I need to update my backlog for that. I need to get my airplane tickets, be ready to go because this is an important point. This is the next point at which I'm going to be able to see the system and understand that that is or isn't the system that I should be looking at. So alignment and operating with common vision, architecture, and UX guidance. And those programs work together as well. We call those agile release trains. They're logical structures, typically may or may not be organizational one because you may not be organized in the way that necessarily follows the flow of value. And rather than immediately breaking down the functional silos, and let's admit, sometimes those functional silos provide certain degrees of operating efficiency and centralization of some things. The Agile Release Train is a virtual program. So all we need ever to do is ask our key stakeholders, do we have permission to work together? And of course, the answer to that is of course. I mean, don't be silly about that. Of course you can work together. But now we can work together in the construct of an Agile portfolio. So our portfolio, you can see this picture here, these chevrons, what is that? Those are value streams. And value streams is the fundamental construct in Lean. You can't talk about Lean in an organization if you don't know what you're doing. If you don't know what process it is that you use to approve purchase orders or buy materials or to interface with the DevOps to deploy your system. So this is the concept of cash view, or at least the input to output view, depending on where you are in the value stream. And we want to organize our trains around value streams. So if you head down the SAFE path, one of the first discussions is how does value flow in your organization now? What does that look like? And then once we understand that, we're going to say, okay, we understand that we're going to centralize strategy, right? We're not just going to wake up and ask 100 teams what we should be building. They will have some good ideas for sure, but strategy is a responsibility for those that really manage the enterprise. That's a centralizable and a centralized set of decisions. But let's not confuse the two. Let's not confuse that we should be building an MRI device with we should build it exactly like here from this level. Let's not be creating fat specifications and handing it all the way down and pretending like at the end of 1 year later something really cool is going to come out, because something will come out, but it won't be very cool. Let's do it differently. Let's go ahead and have our strategy be decided. Let's communicate that strategy through various artifacts, let's just say a vision and roadmap, but then let the teams and the programs execute that strategy, because that's what they do great. They're better at building this stuff than anybody else. After all, that's why we have them around. And let's empower our decision makers with Lean Agile budgeting. And I can't go into that very long, but the long story short is this kind of project management funding has a lot of friction and a lot of overhead, and it's not helping us in any way in terms of improving the flow of work. It tends to create a thing called a feature or a project and then assign people to that. And once finished, they go back into the pool, if you will. Well, they're not a pool. Those are knowledge workers. Let's keep them engaged and keep them focused on what matters. So let's keep execution decentralized. Let's empower decision makers with budgeting. And let's make sure that we provide portfolio visibility and WIP limits, because this is where the work arises. So if this Kanban system here isn't expressing what the work is, and we don't have any idea what the capacity of the trains are, then we're going to want lots of stuff that we can't execute. And if you're having issues in product development or solution development right now, you might ask yourself the question, is, have we bitten off more than we can chew? Have we decided to do more than we actually can? And what happens when you put too much work in a system? A system bogs down, work in process goes up. You have to move parts around, people start multiplexing. And we certainly don't mind metrics, but let's make sure that they're objective metrics and they're metrics based upon the actual results. Let's have our metrics be focused around things like how was that release or that release, or how is this program increment evolving? So that's the Agile portfolio, and people have had astounding success with SAFe. I had a query yesterday. Somebody said on the SBC LinkedIn group, they say, how do you defend that? And I said, well, I don't. This just comes from the case studies. So we'll see case studies here in a second. There's, I don't know, 15 or 20 case studies on the web, and one of the first things to improve dramatically is overall quality and a reduction in defect and warranty cost. Time to market in a way is easier because you divide a big fat release into a bunch of little small ones, and that goes very quickly. Productivity goes up when our developers and testers work together in a common environment, and they have a standard way of working, and they can make their own decisions about the local decisions about what the solution needs to do, and they can test that decision, and they can evaluate it with their product owner and have their customer involved in looking at that. Productivity goes up, it's just a fact, and this is their recorded results, not mine. I don't make up any of these. I don't write any case studies. These case studies are not vignettes of what some of us did when we were in the market. These are the customers themselves reporting their results. And what happens if those things happen? Well, probably the biggest benefit of all, it's just more fun. So I may not be kind of a culture first warrior in terms of approaching the problem, but I really believe in having fun, and I think having fun is just a great way to improve morale, and getting better results is simply a lot more fun. Let's talk a little bit about leadership and how you lead the implementation. Well, here you see the expansion of the leadership pillar that we called out earlier, and a couple more words from Deming, again, our inspiration. People are already doing their best. The problems are with the system. Well, interesting, the problems are with the system. So if I went to your enterprise right now and I said, how's your large-scale software development going? And you said, not great. And I went across the street, maybe I was down in Denver Tech Center, and went from company to company, and I went from Verizon to level 3, for example, and I asked another group of programs how they were doing, and they said, not great. And if you do that day after day, business after business, you have to come to the same conclusion that Deming came to, which is that this isn't about our people. We've hired great people. It's about the system. Well, guess what? It's really hard. I started out as a software developer. I spent many years on the bench, as we used to say, developing new code, and I didn't have the ability to change the system. The system was what I was given. It was a constraint. I could lobby a little bit, I could complain, I could call things impediments, but it really wasn't in my power to do that. So you leaders and managers out there, and I expect there are many of you that have direct reports, and some of you have quite a bit of executive authority. Our expectation is to dive in, lead the change, know the way, emphasize lifelong learning, develop people, they'll develop the products, inspire and align with mission, minimize constraints. We've already talked about these two, decentralized decision making and unlock the intrinsic motivation of knowledge workers. That's the leadership's responsibility. Well, how do we do the rollout? How does implementation work? Well, we have a fairly standard pattern for that that's evolved over the last period, and that's represented here by our spiral. We always start out the same way, which is somebody needs to understand what the new way of working could be, and many of these people need to be internal. If you're a big enterprise out there, and I won't mention any names, but you know who you are, it's not going to be possible for me or our team or any group of consultants to come in and implement a new way of working. Only you can do that. So step number one is to train your internal change agents. We call those SAFe program consultants, as you'll see in a second, and those are the folks that can really make the impact. They do what I've spent a lot of time doing, which is helping managers and leaders understand the new way of working. And here's my discovery. When you give them the opportunity to learn about a new way of working and the pragmatics of Lean and Agile at enterprise scale, they go, well, I can do that. I hadn't read all those books, and I maybe I thought Agile was for small teams or people who had the customer on site, or you know, there was just a lot of empowerment, but autonomy came along with it, and you couldn't really align that, and all they did was complain about our systems. Well, now I understand maybe why they're complaining about our systems, and I can take action. So step number 2 is to train leadership, and we take a pretty strong position there. Everyone involved with this first train, right, needs to understand the new way of working. And at some point, right, we're getting ready to launch that train, and then we're going to train our Agile teams and launch the trains, because, you know, the Agile release train is simply a fractal above an Agile team. It's a bunch of teams, and when they work together, they'll work together more effectively and deliver more value, higher forms of value, and they'll of course deliver the results. And then as you do that, we want to train the specialist roles. You'll come back to the product managers and release trained engineers and scrum masters and product owners and say, how can we help you advance your skill set? Because our systems, our practices pivot on those roles. You'll probably coach the train too. Some of these folks, some of your internal people, and some of our many partners will help deliver the results there as well. And you can find your way to our case studies, which are now organized by industry type. There are case studies as varied as companies like Intel Corporation. This is their MDO division, and after some considerations, they started data Agile release trains in 2 months. Fairly new one. Nordea Bank, one of the largest financial institutions in Scandinavia. Companies like telecom companies like Telstra, retailers, in this case Discount Tire, your nation's largest tire dealer, independent tire dealer. How do I know that? How do I know that? Because they told me that when I was there. Securities companies like TradeStation Securities, even very traditional manufacturers like John Deere. That's one smart combine now, believe me. There's a million lines of code making that combine work, and others as well. So I won't belabor those. I'll take a real quick peek at just a few of their reported results. We talked about quality tends to move very, very quickly, increases in productivity, faster response to customer requests, increases in client satisfaction. This is one case that had an incredibly high reduction. I mean, a 21 reduction in product defects. Again, these are not my numbers. These aren't my case studies. These are theirs. These are what they report. So that's a kind of a brief and quick overview of the Scaled Agile Framework, talking you through the values, principles, and practices, and a few case studies. If you have any questions, you can contact us. You can go to scaledagile.com and hit the info button. Learn how to implement. Go to scaledagile.com/training. Find a partner. I think we have 35 partners now in over 50 cities worldwide. They do service delivery and training. That's our expansion model. Our business is intellectual property and courseware. Their business is helping you succeed. And of course, you can always visit the scaledagileframework.com. That's why it's there. It gets lots and lots of use, and you can find much more information, including these principles are written at length there. The values that I express every so briefly, you can go read about, and of course, every single practice is documented to some extent inside the framework. So that's it for my time box. Thank you very much for attending this webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the class or in the field, or seeing you as a partner, or helping you address real-world problems through our extensive partner network. I'd like to thank Jemilo for bringing me to the table here to record this webinar. And with that, we're going to sign off.
Thank you so much, team. Great webinar, and we'll see you all out in the field and in your enterprises.
Thanks, everyone.